What is up, guys? Welcome to episode 62 of the Triage Method podcast. I'm here with Patrick Farrell, and we've got a special Q&A edition with your questions from Instagram. So, Paddy, how are you this week?
As per usual, I am absolutely fantastic, Gary. You actually look so pretty when you did
that. I am pretty. I forget people can actually see us now, so when I'm trolling you, like, they can see me trolling you. So, I need to cut that out. Have some discipline.
But anyway,
step it up, step up my trolling game. But yeah, I'm here chilling with my baby calf growth fluid, and we're going to get stuck in. My banya. And we're going to get stuck into some questions. So, like, why hesitate? Let's get right into it. Question one was, would you being me and you, Paddy, ever consider opening a gym in the future with Triage? Paddy, what do you think? Are we ever going to open a gym? Or are we just going to be like avatars online forever?
No, 100%, man. Literally, it's already in the works. I plan on opening at least 4 gyms in Ireland. 4 gyms in Ireland.
25.
Yeah, okay, well, you're wrong. You just do what I tell you to do. And then maybe 2 to 3 gyms in England, and then about 50 gyms in America.
50?
Yeah, 1 for each state, like.
Not bad. We'll take it.
Yeah, it'd be decent enough. No, but yeah, seriously, I'm just throwing absolute fucking random fucking numbers out. But yeah, that is on the books. Likely, it'll probably just be a group training facility, because I think that's more applicable to what people want. Like although, like, basically we'd have to have a serious amount of cash on hand to open up a commercial gym, because I just don't see the return on investment for opening up like the commercial gyms you see here. Like, the way I'd want to do it would be an absolute fucking savage gym, and like really good equipment, like more like an American gym, you know, like you see the commercial gyms where they just have fucking boatloads of equipment. The facility itself is just huge, and realistically in Ireland, like to do it in Dublin, man, I'd need to be a millionaire. To do it elsewhere, like, I don't know if the population is there. Like, the next big place you could potentially do it would be maybe Cork. You could open up one there, but I don't know if it would be financially viable. Like, it would definitely be easier to buy the facility, but I don't know if you would get enough people into the facility to make it worthwhile. You know, you could then go maybe Limerick, but after that, I don't know about the commercial facility doing it the way we want to do it anyway. But group training facilities, or even like smaller personal training studios, yeah, 100%. I definitely see that as an avenue that we will potentially be going down sooner rather than later.
Yep, that sounds good to me. And yeah, like commercial gym thing, it's never really attracted me too much, because I think it becomes like far less personal, and the people that are getting involved in the business are not necessarily like coming for the culture, like not all the time. But yeah, I kind of like that idea of like having a business that is based around a sort of like common culture, as in, like, you know, you like Triage because like we all kind of do this stuff, have a somewhat similar perspective on some things in life. Obviously not like a total, you know, fixed ideology, but you kind of get what I mean, as in, like, I think it's easier to do that within a group training structure where you have gyms where there's a group training, there's this kind of a specific culture that is built into that, as opposed to it just being like a gym where you just go just because it's in the area, not because you've been exposed to Triage online or through friends or whatever. So I quite like keeping it a little bit more community based in that sense. But
yeah,
there
like,
you go.
As I said, the only way I see that being viable is basically being like, yeah, we just have the best gym in Europe. Like, you know, it's like people fly in from across the world, basically. Anyone that comes to Ireland is like, yeah, of course you're going to the Triage commercial gym or whatever.
Obviously.
Like, it would have to be like otherworldly, in my mind anyway, to be financially viable. However, that could fucking change. Who the fuck knows? Maybe I might see the books of some commercial gym and be like, you're making that much? That we could definitely do it making that much, you know? So, yeah. Yes is the answer to the question. How that looks remains to be seen. Next question, young skinny guy.
Next question. Opinion on chiropractor/chiropractic care. Okay. I'm going to give you the very diplomatic answer and then the answer that you're probably looking for when you ask this question. Okay. Like, firstly, you cannot give an opinion on a profession because the title of a profession does not necessarily reflect the practices of the individuals within it. So it would be silly to say chiropractors are dumb, because there are very competent evidence-based chiropractors, just like there are very competent evidence-based physiotherapists or any other rehab professionals. And there are also those that practice based on non-evidence-based practice, based on faith to some degree, and stories, and an anecdote as opposed to actual science. So that happens in every profession, and I don't think I can reliably say that chiropractors are worse for that than physios, because you definitely see your fair share of quackery in physiotherapy as well. But to get to probably what you're actually asking is like, what is my opinion on the chiropractic techniques that are actually used? And that's typically things like high velocity manipulations and stuff like that. So basically a fancy way of cracking someone's back. Like, that's essentially what chiropractic is generally known for. I know that's not only the case, but that's probably what you're asking. And in that case, like chiropractic, there's a lot of flaws within chiropractic care. Those who are more old school and still like subscribe to the idea that you are fixing specific subluxations within the spine that leads to improvement in disease, not even just pain, but also like diseases. Like, that to me is like a false theory that you should definitely try and move yourself away from. But broader to that, like, the actual manual therapies that are used are often based on like false stories again, and we've talked about that in the manual therapy podcast. We've also written about it on our website. Basically, a lot of the narratives that are provided to justify treatments related to manual therapies, thrust manipulations, etc., are not they're not doing what they say they do. And the effects, yes, they may lead to reductions in pain, but like we've talked about many times, lots of things can lead to reductions in pain. And you know, there's even studies on the use of like chiropractic manipulations in the thoracic spine versus an unplugged ultrasound, leading to no difference in outcomes between the two. So there's always going to be placebo effects at play when you're dealing with improvements in pain, especially when it comes to a theatrical intervention. There's a sort of a theatrical component to the intervention, because you go to the chiropractor, there's a certain expectation. They fulfill your expectation by telling you what they're going to do and giving you the story related to that. And then there's also the added sensory cues of you feeling something happening in your back and you hearing the actual sound of cracking, and all of that feeds into the response then in terms of like the change in your experience. So in terms of like, are chiropractors bad people? No. Can you have great chiropractors? Yes. Can you have terrible chiropractors? Yes. Are the narratives and the stories that go along with a lot of the typical treatments in chiropractic care evidence-based? No, they're not. And it's generally not what I would recommend people seek out when they are experiencing pain or disability. Now, having said that, if you want someone to crack your back because it's almost like just scratching an itch for you and you just know it feels nice and it's not really doing anything that's going to be of lasting benefit, you're willing to spend your money the way you'd like, you know?
The only things that I would add to that is, first of all, if you want free chiropractic, just do jiu-jitsu.
There you go.
Secondly, I'm actually scared of chiropractic, whatever the fuck, chiropractors, maybe. Purely from just reading all that research, you know, where it's like they give people strokes and stuff. They like make a neck manipulation and they fucking, I don't know, do shit with the the carotid artery or some shit, and people are literally like an hour or two later they just have a stroke, and it's because of the treatment. And also, one of my friend's older brother is a neurosurgeon. I was like, he's a neurosurgeon, and he's like, yeah, I hate chiropractic. Well, he's like, I love chiropractic because it makes me loads of money because people get fucked up from it. But he's like, I hate it as a profession. So that obviously clouds my view of the whole thing. But yeah, I also don't think in most cases the human body is fragile enough like to be severely limited by going to a chiropractor. Like, yes, if you get someone to crack your neck, shit can go wrong. But literally, you can walk out in the street and shit can go wrong. So yeah, free chiropractic, just do jujitsu. You should be like, oh yeah,
It's like, oh shit. Yeah, like obviously, like there are some darker areas to it in that, like you're talking about the neck manipulations. Obviously, there can be a risk there, and I think often people try to downplay the risk by using statistics. Like for example, if you say that it only happens in 0.0001% of cases of neck manipulation, it's like, yeah, that sounds nice statistically, but if you actually think about the actual risk, as in like it's not like a risk of pain, it's like a risk of actual death. It's like death becomes far more relevant to people, even if it is a very small percentage. So you still have to think about how that risk might relate to people, because risk can often sound really simple in statistical terms, but when you put it in real life terms, it's like, oh, actually, I might want to think about this a bit more. And the other thing that's really dark about chiropractic is this whole, like, I'm not sure if you've seen it, like apply the application of chiropractic care to children, like kids, babies, literally babies. You see them cracking their backs and like the babies are crying and stuff. And I'm like, man, like what made you think this was a good idea? Like, this is just not cool. But anyway, next question is a question I really like, because it's actually something that I get a lot in my DMs when I'm talking about research. But the question is, and this is from someone who I know is into research. So do you think there's too much emphasis on research for justification and not enough on anecdotal evidence? Now, this person who's asking this is coming from is someone that is very likely to be following lots of people who are within the evidence-based sphere. Okay, now that's rare. Okay, like what you have to realize is that if you're in a circle where you think that people are over reliant on evidence for reasoning, then you're very likely to be stuck in a filter bubble online or a very specific niche where people happen to be talking about evidence. In the vast, like the majority of the fitness industry, majority of the discussions about health online are not focusing on evidence. Like, venture beyond the people that you actually follow and look at hashtags, like put in #fitness and see what people are talking about on Instagram. You'll find that you've actually just been stuck in this little silo as opposed to seeing what everyone else is doing. So yeah, I absolutely do not think there's too much of an emphasis on research at all. And very often what happens here is that people will say, oh, but clinical practice is so far ahead of the research. However, like, ironically, there's actually research on how long it takes clinical practice to catch up to the research, and the figure given is 17 years, but like, that's in medicine. It doesn't mean it applies in every field. But what you'll generally see is that practice can absolutely be very behind what we know from the research, and I'm sure you're very aware of that, Paddy, from like your own like field of biochemistry and like biomedical sciences and stuff. It's probably very relevant in that field in particular.
Yeah, and when people say this about like the fitness industry, like they're not actually wrong, because in certain cases you are going to have individuals that are ahead of the research, like they're coming up with new methodologies, or again, more likely they came up with new methodologies. They always use like Poliquin as an example. Like, it was like, oh, he was talking about this in 1970 and it's only came to be proven in 1990 whatever. It's like, yeah, like you can use that as your whole justification, but you have to remember that there was thousands, if not maybe even millions of trainers that were also around at that time that were completely relying on anecdotal evidence and were 20, 30 years behind. So just because there's one individual that was potentially ahead of the research in a certain aspect, I'm not endorsing anything, whatever, that doesn't mean that the field as a whole is ahead of the research, because realistically, in most cases, like you're saying, it's way behind the research. So I definitely don't think there's too much emphasis on research for justification and not enough on anecdotal evidence. Also, I'm going to presume, I don't know who asked this question, but I'm going to presume they are talking about this health and fitness industry as a whole. And the unfortunate thing about this whole health and fitness industry is everyone is a pathological liar. Okay, so they will say, no, literally, like they'll say, like, "Oh, I'm doing this and X, Y, Z, and this is this new training method," but they'll just leave out the fact that they're on fucking 5 grams of tren a week. You know, so it's like, yeah, like, okay, yeah, you might be saying you have discovered this new fucking methodology or whatever else, but you're ignoring the fact that, you know, the drugs you're on is the contributing factor, you know? So I definitely don't think that. I also, most people will say they're evidence-based, and quite in fact, they're not evidence-based. What they're saying when they say they're evidence-based is they follow people who write about the primary literature, right? Like they themselves, in most cases, are not actually reading the primary literature, right? And even then, you could be like I actually don't think that's a huge issue, because I'm like, well, like not everyone has the ability, the time, the fucking whatever to read the primary literature. So they're obviously going to need someone to interpret that. But also, as I said, most people in the fitness industry are pathological liars. So they intentionally misrepresent the primary literature, or not even misrepresent, just talk about literature that supports their viewpoint. And like they might even read research that's like, oh yeah, this is completely blows my point out of the water, but they won't update their points. Like you will see online quite often, people do update, like the evidence-based people will update their methodologies or whatever you want to call them. And they're like, yeah, new research came out, or research that I thought supported my point has been shown to not support my point. So my point has now changed, you know? And it's like, yeah, cool, that's perfect. I actually love to see that. But what most people will do in the fitness industry is like, no, I'm going to stick with my point because I've actually built my entire following off this point, you know? And it's like that, okay, like, yeah, that's cool and everything, but it's like you're now telling everyone that you're evidence-based when the evidence does not support your point and or your points, and thus you're not evidence-based. So yeah, I think there's not enough emphasis on research for justification, and there is too much emphasis on anecdotal evidence. However,
yeah,
that still needs to be cautioned with, you know, sometimes the anecdotal stuff is right, and ideally that would be what is helping to inform better research, I suppose.
Yeah, and I think the key point really is like I'm not trying to like diss anecdote or experience. Like I think it's actually really valuable, and you'll actually find a lot of problems with the way in which people use science in some cases. But I suppose like what we're saying is that like we would assume that we're talking about using evidence the way it should be used, as opposed to using it to support a specific narrative. And like what I found like over time through my experience of reading the research and stuff is like what you end up doing when you read the research over time is you actually end up being uncertain. Like you end up with a degree of uncertainty at the end point of knowing all of the literature in a specific area. And then what you end up doing is you can then apply the kind of experience and the more artistic aspect of coaching, let's say, because like we're not going to get to a point where we have evidence to just put together a training program for you. It's not what it's there to do. You know, I don't think that's the purpose of research evidence. Like research evidence in an applied training setting, let's say, is there to give us some insight into what principles may or may not be important. So like the principles of like things like volume and frequency and intensity and even like the way in which specific exercises might work. Like, let's say if it's an exercise that has a very large eccentric component, that might have some different effects to a different type of exercise. Like that's all useful. But then you layer on top the art of coaching, and even like reasoning based on basic physiology, in some cases based on mechanics, based on anatomy. Like, you're still allowed to use these things, but I wouldn't call that anecdote. I'd call that the use of like some additional rationale that has been well thought out, that you have some theory for, as opposed to just it worked for me. Now, having said that, if there's something that's very stable over time that has consistently worked, like whether it's like economics, or whether it's something social, whether it's training, whether it's nutrition, if something is consistently working over time in multiple different populations, in multiple different contexts, then I would look at that and be like, all right, that's interesting anecdotal evidence. Like, that to me is interesting experience. Or if let's say all of the major coaches that have coached Olympic weightlifting athletes are all saying very similar things about a specific training practice, then I'd be like, all right, that's interesting. We actually need to pay attention to that, because that's a signal among the noise. However, like, you need to be able to find a way to find those signals among the noise, because otherwise you just focus on the noise. And there's countless anecdotal evidence. Like, some people will say, oh yeah, high intensity training works better. Other people say high volume training works better. Some people will say, oh, training 7 days a week works better. Oh no, just train one muscle group 1 day per week. And it's like that's just all noise. But there are some signals that get elevated, and then they're the types of things that you will see play out in research. So you can absolutely use both. And I think there can definitely be cases where people push the evidence too far, and just like they might be able to make a decision because they don't have a specific paper to justify like whether you do 6 reps or 8 reps. But in my experience, like it doesn't happen often. Like realistically, no one is reading 20 papers a day on PubMed. Like, it's just not a thing.
Yeah, that's fair. Next question, Gary, what is it?
Next question is favorite alcoholic beverage currently. Paddy, what's yours?
Water.
Paddy used to drink cider. Paddy used to drink cider. Ugh, how weak is that?
I actually used to drink vodka straight, but cider was a nice little, like, beverage with the boys. But
juice. It's like juice.
Exactly. Like, I don't understand. Like, beer, first of all, it tastes like piss. People are like, oh, no. It's an acquired taste. Right, I'm sorry that you have acquired the taste of piss. Like, that's not my fault. I'm not going to engage in that myself, right? So, 100%, you can go drink your piss water if you want, right? I will sit over here, if I was to drink something that tastes like the gods have squished apples and made it into a beverage. Like, that's fine. I will drink my apple juice.
I generally like IPAs. I like kind of like stronger beers in general, darker beers. I like them. Had a lovely O'Hara's double Irish stout last night with a little bit of dark chocolatey vanilla taste, and that was delicious. But yeah, no, I just kind of like darker beers, like IPAs. I don't have anything in specific because I'm not a big drinker. I don't have like this connoisseur level taste. But yeah, they'd be my general preferences. I also like a good Peroni. Can't beat that. But there you go. That's our alcohol triage method endorsed. Alcoholic beverages.
Zero alcohol.
Zero.
Degenerate. I used to be a degenerate. I got off that life, man. Much better for you.
There you go. Next question is, ever gone into the concept of refeed days? Paddy, you ever heard of the concept of refeed days, bro?
Never heard of it. There's actually loads of articles on our site about it, but never heard of
it. Yes, we have probably heard of refeed days. Like, I suppose, like, historically, refeed days were used by bodybuilders who were losing body fat, and they would use these refeed or cheat days in an attempt to quote unquote boost their metabolism. Okay, that's typically how they were used. I guess our general perspective, you can update it if you'd like. Our general perspective on the use of refeed days would be that they're probably not necessary for most people. They're not likely to have unique like metabolism boosting effects, and may potentially compromise fat loss if they push you out of your calorie deficit for the week. The main benefit I would see of using refeed days, where you're increasing your calories and your carbohydrates in particular up to around maintenance. The main benefit I would see is probably a psychological benefit, where someone is able to get out of their normal dieting practices and have a day where they're eating a little bit more food, they're not quite as hungry, they're able to fuel training a little bit better, and that would be where I would see some use there. But for most of our clients, like, I don't know about you, Paddy, but like most of our clients are general population. I don't ever really need to use like refeed days. However, like sometimes we'll have like diet breaks. I prefer multi-day or like week-long diet breaks if someone is dieting for a long period of time, especially if they're getting quite lean. And I think they tend to have better effects both like psychologically and physiologically if you want to like reduce like some of the adaptations to dieting or drop-offs in performance. I think a week-long approach is generally better. Would you agree?
100%. I think the research would show, like we're saying, you want to use research and anecdote. Research would suggest that at least, like very least 3 days, you're going to need to see any kind of hormonal changes in a meaningful manner. So I like 3 to 7 days if you are going to do a refeed. But my general thought process is I'd rather just see someone diet on higher calories every day. Like if you're going to have a refeed day that, especially if you're doing a cheat day, which is what most people consider a refeed day, where they're like, oh yeah, just refeeding, and they literally eat about 3,000 extra calories. And it's like, okay, well, you now have to diet on 1,800 calories, which just makes you go, yeah, I need that cheat day because it's psychological. I'm like, I'd rather just see you actually dieting on an appropriate level of calories throughout the whole week and moving towards your goal without actually feeling overly restricted. So yeah, I think the research would suggest if you're going to do a refeed, realistically at least 3 days of maintenance or above. Or what I like more is, like you said, Gary, that kind of just full diet break where it's like, yeah, we're back to maintenance, maybe even just a little bit above maintenance. The only time I see refeeds being appropriate is if someone has perhaps an event that they want to go to, they just want to eat more that day. It's like, I'm not justifying this with any like, oh, this is for fucking leptin resetting or anything. It's like, no, we're just going to eat more this day. That's fine. Just stay within your maintenance. No big deal. Or if somebody has maybe a game or sport or whatever the next day, we might go, okay, we have been dieting. We're going to bring us back to maintenance or slightly above maintenance the day before, the day of the game, just so performance is that slight bit better, but again, I'm not using that as I'm not justifying that by going like, oh, it's mental, it's psychological, or it's some physiological stuff happening. I'm like, I personally just don't see that stuff happening. I haven't seen it in the like anecdotal stuff, or I haven't seen it in the literature. However, what you will see is people going, yeah, refeeds really work for me. Like I always wake up the next day, I'm leaner, my performance is great. And it's like, yeah, like all you did was eat extra carbs. Like, so of course you've just topped up your glycogen. So you feel leaner because, your muscle is fuller with glycogen. And maybe you did pull some like, you've done some water balance shifting and you pulled some water from under the fat and you've pulled it into the muscle because glycogen or carbs generally bring in muscle or bring in water into the muscle. So maybe you have done a bit of that. So you do feel that little bit more muscularly fuller and you have a little bit less water and you're like, oh, like this, it just works for me 100%. But it would also just work for you if you just ate those carbs throughout the week, like you would be fuller. You wouldn't have been as glycogen depleted, So it's like, yeah, they're the exact same approach. All you're doing is strategically placing it on one day where you could have done the exact same thing except across the entire week. You will see people as well go, look, I had this refeed day and my weight dropped. And again, it's more often than not just like water weight trickery. It's like, yeah, did you notice that? Yeah, your NEAT went up. You just see, you was like, oh, cool. Like I started moving around a little bit more. Like again, it's not hugely meaningful, but maybe if you're in the depths of a diet and you're like, you're not tracking your NEAT and you have a refeed day and all of a sudden you're like, boom, okay, I'm moving around more, I feel great. And maybe you're urinating more because again this water balance trickery is going on, and then you wake up the next day, you're like, oh, unreal. But in everyone I see who actually tracks their NEAT in some sort of way, it could be steps, And people who do refeeds, if you track your NEAT and do refeeds, I just don't see these huge drops or these huge changes in activity. Whereas I do see that in people who don't track their NEAT. Like they'll have their phone on them, and then you go, okay, cool, you're doing refeeds, and you'd be like, okay, let me see your activity level. And they're like, I did a refeed on this day, and you just see their NEAT, their steps just go way up. And it's like, yeah, no wonder you're not tracking your steps at all. And then you do a refeed, all of a sudden your NEAT goes up, and yeah, of course, the next day you lost weight. Like it's not hard to understand why.
Yes, sir. That covers that, I think. The next question was, can placebo play a big factor for supplements or medicine with little evidence? For example, CBD. Yes, absolutely. This is something that I think we touched on in detail on the podcast titled Magic Words. I think we touched on it in that a good bit. But yeah, basically the very simple answer is yes. Like most of the evidence on placebo-related effects has originated from that like biomedical research, where that's like that placebo term is generally associated with a placebo pill. So a pill that has nothing but sometimes sugar or just an inert pill. There's nothing really in it. So like that's where the word placebo initially kind of came from. And I think the placebo effects themselves like can be delineated into like a placebo effect specifically, or placebo responses, and all that stuff is like definitely worth looking into if you're really interested in this topic. But does it play an effect? Absolutely. And the effect that it might have would depend on multiple different factors, like even the actual ritual of taking a pill is part of the placebo effects that you might experience. So that any improvement in symptoms, like for example, one of the things that you see in like morphine administration is that like if it's concealed that that morphine is being stopped, so they're no longer administering it, and the doctor says to the patient, oh, we're going to stop administering this morphine now, then you'll see increases in pain again. So that pain relieving effect is essentially gone. And then on the other side of things, if they don't tell them that they're going to stop it, essentially you continue to have those pain relieving effects, and that can go in multiple different directions. Like for example, if you tell people there's going to be a harmful effect, there's more likely to be a harmful effect. That would be then related to like pharmacy, for example. If you want to make people aware of the side effects of a drug, they're then more likely to experience side effects of a drug. But obviously there are medical legal issues there, so you can't just say like, oh, don't tell people there's going to be side effects. But yeah, so it's definitely relevant, especially with things like CBD, because what you see with CBD a lot of the time is that, like I think we mentioned this in the last podcast, or 2 podcasts ago, but like what you'll see with CBD a lot of the time is people get their narratives about CBD from the internet, from forums, from people who are trying to sell them CBD, and they'll say, oh, it really improves sleep. And then you actually look into the research and it's like, this actually doesn't really help sleep at all, like from what we can see. That, of course, there may be individuals, but in general, it doesn't seem to do much. But if you've set the expectation for someone and there's the ritual of taking the CBD before bed, then all of that can potentiate placebo effects. So yeah, definitely really relevant. And you can add something there, Paddy. I just want to show people a book.
I have literally nothing to add. Yeah, 100%.
This book, if you're interested in this topic, for those watching the video, you'll see it. It's called Placebo Effects by Fabrizio Benedetti. If you do any research or if you read any research on like PubMed or wherever about placebo effects, you're going to come across his name. That's his book, and it's absolutely fantastic. It goes into all different like areas of research, like related to medicine, related to like pain, surgery, even. Lots of different areas. So that's definitely worth a look if that's of interest to you, if you happen to care, man.
It's too easy. Literally too easy. Anyway, next question. Garroich.
Next question. 10-year goals for Triage. Take over the world.
I want it to be disbanded.
Just general world. I want us to have like a space force, like, you know.
No, 10-year goals.
I want like
You're not. You look. You don't get to tell us where the business goes. You literally do nothing all day and go, "Oh, I'm so busy. Always late to our meetings. Everything. It's disgusting."
Literally run this podcast.
Literally,
anyway, go on. 10-year goals.
One of your clients asked you how to upload the podcast, and you were like, ask Paddy. I don't know. So weak.
No, that's not true. He wanted to subscribe his podcast to Spotify, and that's what he asked help with.
So weak, Gary. You just don't even know what's going on. Anyway, 10-year goals. Gary, what do you think our 10-year goals are?
Well, my goals, not your goals. My goals are related more so to a longer term, like, philosophy rather than a specific thing. Like, to be honest, I don't care if in 10 years we have like a supplement and clothing company as part of our business or not. Like, if they are part of our business, I don't particularly care, as long as our overall business is following the mission statement of essentially empowering people to live the best lives they can through science-based health and fitness information. Like, that's what we want to do, is empowering individuals. So, like, ideally, in terms of like actual concrete stuff, in 10 years time, definitely like to have like at least one gym where we have people working on the ground, spreading the triage culture. Online, we will have a ridiculous library of information available all for free for people, which will be fantastic. We'll have multiple different ebooks written. We will, like, Paddy really wants a supplement business, so we'll definitely have a supplement business. We'll have lots of Too Easy t-shirts and stuff like that, and we'll definitely be making our way internationally by that point, I think.
In 10 years, yeah, 100%.
Of course.
Yeah, like, I just think, I'm like, I hate all this stuff where people tell you as a business, you need to have a 5-year plan, you need to have a 10-year plan, you need to have this. I'm like, yeah, like, obviously you need direction. Like if you're not aiming at something, you're aiming at nothing, you know? So obviously you need direction, but I'm in the same boat as you. I'm like, it's more so an ideology or first principles, if you will, rather than the method we go about it. I'm like, I just want people to realize that they're fucking savages.
That's pretty much, like, that is the summary, ultimately, like. So we want.
Like, I love competence. Like, I love when, you know, you just walk into a shop or something and the cashier or whatever is just really competent at their job. And that's all I want. I just want people that are just really, really competent at whatever the fuck they choose to do, because they're not limited by their health or fitness. I'm like, that's all I want. I want you to be 100% healthy, 100% fit, so that life is literally too easy for you and you are just a fucking savage at whatever the fuck you choose to do.
Yeah, and that's pretty much it. Like, just because, like, we discussed this last week, but I mean, just because you're, like, we happen to be involved in like the health and fitness stuff, that's only the avenue through which we kind of basically approach our specific mission statement, which is, as you said, like, empowering individuals to be savage, competent members of society. Like, that is the ultimate goal, because I think that is, like, as you'll have heard us talk about in the solo episode I did about health, like, that's actually, all these things are intertwined. Like, you actually want to be someone that is competent, that is, like, financially stable, you know, that sees meaning and purpose in their work, that, you know, is a good family and community member. Like, all that stuff is actually really important. It sounds really soft, but it's, you know, the basics of being a human. And I think we often just don't talk about that, as in, like, you go your whole way through school and you learn all these, like, loose topics, but no one ever says to you, well, like, it depends on your teachers, obviously, but it's never really ingrained in people that, like, you know, you can actually be a competent individual. Like, this is what you should take pride in. Those sorts of things are what I think are really important. So there you go.
Yeah, like, I just want to get to Valhalla. So Odin only chooses the best. So you have to be the best, you know, the best man, woman, child that you can be, you know?
There you go. But yeah, respect competence. There you go. Are you a guard puller? We actually talked about this before the podcast, because I wasn't actually aware that this was like a, you know, like a little bit of a jiu-jitsu meme, because I'm quite new. But apparently a guard puller is someone that just pulls you into their guard, and then they just sit there and doesn't actually try to do anything. So am I that? I don't know. Maybe sometimes. Jeez, I didn't know it was a bad thing. So now maybe I'll be conscious of not doing it. But when you're unskilled, like
you're definitely a guard puller. Yeah, but generally it is someone who just pulls guard, like as in like just pulls guard, right? And it is what you do when you're scared. It's like, okay, well, I don't know anything. Well, I know I can hold you here, so I'll do that. So you probably are, because you're always scared as well.
Nah, I try not to. I actually don't do that. I always end up in like some awkward position where I think I'm in a good position, and I'm like, actually, shit, I have this guy's arm, and then I'm losing it. I'm like, fuck. But there you go. Anyway, don't know if I'm a guard puller. We'll see. What are your thoughts, Paddy, on the anti-diet movement?
What is the anti-diet movement?
Yeah, see, this is the thing. We actually need to define terms here, because there can actually be a lot of good that can come from this and potentially a lot of bad that can come from this. So, like, the anti-diet movement as a broader thing is part of what I would refer to as, the health at every size movement. So the idea of being anti-diet is the idea that you can promote healthful behaviors without telling someone that they need to diet or lose weight. And this certainly has positive applications, because if, let's say, someone has a history of eating disorders, you might want them to adopt more intuitive, mindful eating practices in order to improve their kind of relationship with food and their ability to learn to eat again. Or it might be the case that someone has a health condition that is totally unrelated to weight, and you don't necessarily want to just go in and be like, oh, you need to lose weight. It also could even be relevant for someone like who has, let's say, some sort of cardiometabolic disease that is related to weight. But it could be the case that by focusing only on weight, then you're not actually, encouraging the person to adopt the helpful practices of eating more fiber, of improving diet quality, of improving their exercise habits, of improving their sleep, etc. So I think that's the really positive aspect of being quote unquote anti-diet. Although I would just kind of look at it as being like, you can improve health with weight neutral behaviors without focusing solely on weight. I think that's a good message. However, there's another side of it where people are just totally like cold turkey against all things related to dieting, and even the suggestion of weight loss or the promotion of satisfaction with the fact that someone lost weight is basically you get shouted at for doing it. And this is quite pervasive on social media, where especially with women, unfortunately, a woman will post a picture and she'll be really happy that she lost weight, and like, as we've discussed, like we like people bettering themselves, and if someone does that, like a woman or man or whatever, I would commend them for that, and I'd be like, that's fantastic, fair play to you for doing that. However, what's happening now as part of this kind of no diet movement is that what some people will do is they'll come along and actually give out to that person and tell them that they're promoting diet culture and promoting eating disorders and promoting the value in some bodies over others. And I think that's where the problems really come into this, because it sort of, it criticizes people for trying to better themselves and for actually being successful at doing something, which is almost like, trying to just create this level line of mediocrity where you just accept everything and you don't even try to improve yourself. And I think that there's definitely toxic elements to that.
To be quite honest, I actually don't have a huge opinion, because I don't really go on social media and I just don't see this stuff, right? However, like you suggested, there is obviously pros and cons to this, because I do think for a lot of people, this over focus on scales, weight, like, it doesn't help a lot of people. Like, it actually just discourages a lot of people from actually seeking medical help for issues they may have, and then the issues become compounded to an actual bigger issue, and it even discourages people from doing stuff which may be actually a direct causality, I suppose, from their struggle with their weight, right? And what I mean by that is, like, you might have subclinical diabetes, right? Like you're on that kind of borderline between, like, you know, maybe some days you actually you're in that diabetic range, but some days you're not, right? And you're just fearful of actually going to the doctor because you know they're just going to be like, yeah, just lose weight, and they'll just fob you off like that. So there is obviously a reason. Excuse me. There is obviously a reason to have this movement, have this broader talking point, this nuance added to the information you get around nutrition and whatever else. However, it can become toxic, like you're saying, where people then go the complete opposite way, right? They're like, oh, like it's almost anti-skinny, if that makes sense, like, or anti-fit, you know, rather than being anti-diet. Well, like they'll literally, like you're saying, give out about someone, like they'll literally, all they'll talk about is body positivity. You should love your body. And then someone will say, I lost 10 pounds and now I love my body. And they'll give out to that person. You know, it's like, like you're distorting the message because of your relationship with the scales, or your relationship with the mirror, or whatever metric it is that's messing you up. And you will then go, oh no, look, you shouldn't be doing something that makes you love yourself more, but you should love your body at the same time. It's like this is kind of dichotomous. Like these two thoughts are not coherent together. Like you can't say you should love your body and then say to someone who now says they love their body that they did something wrong. You know, like, again, you will see this as well. Like it's not just women. I know you said it is loads of women, but it's not just women. But you'll see someone say something like they'll be relatively lean. They're in this fucking health and fitness industry or whatever, and they'll be relatively lean, and then they'll say like, oh, I feel fat, I feel bloated. You know, maybe they're on their period or the week before their period or whatever. You know, and they're like, I feel fat or I feel bloated, and people will literally in the comments tell them to shut the fuck up, that they're not fat, that, you know, you're putting out a bad image to the fitness. You're basically influencing younger people to feel bad about themselves. And it's like, these people are just expressing how they feel. Like the entire narrative is about your feelings towards your body, improving the feelings towards your body. And this person is expressing that they feel bloated, feel fat, or whatever. And it's like, you're now degrading them for that. And like, that's, in my mind, I'm like, that's not empowering. That's not helpful for either case. Now, obviously, like any ideology, it is unfortunately the loudest people that tarnish the entire ideology. You know, and this goes to politics, this goes to religion, this goes to whatever the fuck. It's always the vocal minority that then destroy the silent majority, you know? And it's like the on social media, presumably, you just get this kind of, not even an echo chamber. Like I just don't see, do people go on about social media being an echo chamber? And I just don't see that. I'm like, you realize that, okay, the echo chamber, all that happened was it got a little bit bigger because people still were always talking about this stuff in person, in their community, in their societal groups. And it's like, all you've done is made the echo chamber bigger. So it's like, I just don't see how people are like, this social media is ruining everyone. I'm like, people are just dickheads, full stop. So they'll do it wherever. They'll do it on a social media platform or they'll do it at home. It doesn't fucking matter. So there's that. And I just don't see, unfortunately, it playing out a good way for a lot of people, because on both sides of it, like it is clearly a needed movement, but it's also an easily disrupted movement, or easily deferred movement. I don't even know the word, you know, and easily a movement that you can easily make corrupt. Corrupt is probably the best word, you know, where you can bring about a message that is actually empowering people, or you can bring about a message that is basically just saying like, oh yeah, love your body and don't ever try to better yourself. Like, even if you're like, oh yeah, I actually have pre-diabetes and, you know, cleaning up my diet or whatever, losing a little bit of weight would actually improve things. It's like, no, don't do any of that. That's bad. And it's like, you're giving, one is a toxic message and one is an empowering message. And it's like, when I see people talking, I'm like, you're talking about loving yourself, you're talking about empowerment, and then you're going down the corrupt route, you know? And it's like, this is just from someone on the outside looking in. But yeah, also I would like to add the nuance, yeah, I suppose, on top of that, of saying that people who love their body don't tell other people they love their body, right? So for me, I'm like I just don't think of that. Like, it never enters my head. Like, my body is literally just the thing that allows me to do the other things that I want to do. Allows me to move around. Like, you could call it a vehicle, but I don't even think that. Like, it's just me. It's just the thing that allows me to do what I want to do, like move around, you know? And it's like, it doesn't define me as a person. I'm indifferent to it. Like, yes, I love my body because it allows me to do everything that I want to do, but I'm not, like, if I gain 5 kilos, I honestly just don't care. Like, it's irrelevant to my overall life. Like, I could get 17-inch arms. I just don't see it improving my life in any meaningful way. So, like, when someone says, I love my body, and they consistently say they love my body, or they love their body, I'm like, and people who love their body don't think this. So in my mind, again, like, I don't know, I'm not engaging with these people, so I don't know the thought process. But in my mind, I'm like, I just don't see people who actually love their body talking about this. So there's that.
Yeah. So yeah, like, you know, the message can be very helpful, or it can be very radical. And I think it is definitely helpful to adopt the thought process that, you know, you are more than just like how your body looks like, and the fact that, like, you should hopefully be competent in something else other than how you look. Like, it's not a thing that you should be thinking about all the time, and that, like, you should view yourself as being, you know, as your body essentially being relatively uninteresting versus the rest of yourself and your abilities and the things that you can offer to the world. So, like, that to me is the empowering way of looking at this. And I think very often it's just, again, like, that false dichotomy that you have to be either the person that says fat people are bad, you have to be ripped. Like, no one actually says that, but the people on the other side of the spectrum make it look like those people are saying that. And, you know, likewise, you could be that kind of non-diet professional to some degree and have those perspectives without being the total radical. Like, there are some, like, lots of people who are part of this movement that will say things like, you know, dieting, the simple act of trying to lose weight, is created by white males who run capitalism to try and oppress women. Like, that's where that stuff just becomes ridiculously radical, because it's like, how did you actually conclude this? And then ironically, you know, that movement then, you know, sells their own non-diet health professional books as part of capitalism. And it's like, oh, well, this is convenient, isn't it? Convenient way of gathering a following on a, you know, private platform or public platform, whatever. There you go. But yeah, there's a spectrum. Don't dichotomize it. Take what you need from that movement, and I don't know, don't become radical, I guess.
I think the best way to think of it is, I think the best way to think of it is, a diet doesn't mean you're losing weight. A diet is simply the food that you eat. Like, it shouldn't mean weight loss, it shouldn't mean weight gain. They are merely outcomes based on the diet that you eat. Like, animals eat diets. Like, everyone eats a diet, you know? So everyone's on a diet. So if you're anti-diet, you're anti-food, you're anti-eating.
Anti-eating. There you go. But yeah, like most things we discuss at Triage, you know, there's a spectrum there, and you can very much have a centrist view that is, you know, very rational, very reasonable, and that appreciates what people might be saying on both sides. So there you go. The next question was, you guys seem to train in a generalist way. Why is that? I assume generalist in this case relates to, like, you know, having your hand in multiple different pies, not being powerlifters, not being purely joggers, whatever. Teddy, what's the story of the generalist approach? Why would you train like that?
Well, I just want to be relatively okay at everything. Like my training philosophy personally is I want to always be able to save myself. Like whatever situation I come into, I don't want to feel like, basically I don't want my ghost to come back and say that my training let me down. Right? I just don't want. As I said, I want to get to Valhalla. Like I don't want to die in battle to get there. Like I want to be killed like a warrior. But the only way you can do that is if you are adequately trained. You are able, like, fatigue makes bitches of us all, right? So I just don't want to be fatigued. So that means I have to be cardiovascularly fit. I also don't want a fucking log to fall on me and I just can't get it off my chest because I'm not strong enough, you know? So I'm like, I just think you should be fit, whatever that means for the stuff that you plan on engaging in, and you should be strong enough so that you have an excess of strength, like you have strength in reserve to do whatever the fuck needs to be done in your daily life, right? Because I think every individual who is able should at least be able to save themselves. So if there's a burning building, you are at least able to save yourself. If your fucking car crashes off into a pier or into a body of water or whatever the fuck, you should be able to swim to safety. If something happens, you should be able to run to safety, you know? So that's my philosophy. And then I also believe, obviously, those that are able, the next step then is to be able to save others. And that's kind of more towards what I train towards. Like I want to be able to, like I just couldn't have that on my conscience, whatever. If I could have done something, but I was too weak, too scared, too fucking unfit or whatever to save someone I loved, or even just another individual, you know? So that's why I train like a generalist. I don't see any other way of training giving you that ability. Like if I just became a pure marathon runner, like yes, I probably would be fitter, but I don't know if I would be stronger, you know? Like I don't know if that would make me any better able to do what I want to be able to do, you know? Like everything else I see has pitfalls to it. And that's not to say like my training has my training doesn't have pitfalls to it. Like, and again, sometimes I won't be at my maximum capacity for strength, for fitness, for muscle mass, whatever the fuck, whatever metric. But I still have that generalist base. Basically, what CrossFit tries to do is what I want to do with my training. I just don't think that high rep snatches are a way to do it.
Yeah, I agree. I think like that's why the CrossFit type of training is actually appealing to a lot of people, because it does give them kind of that generalist fitness base, but sometimes the practices within that aren't necessarily, optimal. And I kind of like the idea of leading my own training as well. Like I like training on my own, and I kind of like having the freedom of, deciding what if I want to change my program on a given day, that's fine. And I don't think like the CrossFit environment would be like my favorite training environment. But yeah, like the generalist way of training is obviously good for all of the things that you listed, but also like if you even think of like what's contributing to long-term health, to health and longevity, and to, not being diseased, if you will, like training in a generalist way is a good approach. And I think people forget that. I think sometimes people think that just because they train with really heavy weights that they're free of the responsibility of doing cardiovascular work. And it's like, no, you actually still have to do this for health. Similarly on the other side of the spectrum, like you could have a very high VO2 max, but if you don't have great muscle strength, then that might be a hole in your, health and longevity equation. So again, you'd be giving yourself a better chance by doing that. So there's the functional aspect in terms of like what you talked about, of, traversing the world, saving yourself, helping others, being useful in multiple different situations. That's all useful. Then there's the health aspect of it. And then there's also, like, which is important, a degree of like it just being enjoyable and promoting adherence. Like if you enjoy your training and if you enjoy your training, you enjoy what you do overall, then you're far more likely to adhere to that in the long run. And for me, at this point in time, like I don't think I could train purely like a powerlifter and look forward to training every day. Like I like the idea of, having jiu-jitsu some days, having my more strength focused sessions some days, doing, some jogging some days, doing some conditioning work in the gym some days. I quite like the variety that's there with the knowledge that it's all contributing to an improvement in health and function over the long term. So there you go. That's the generalist approach.
Next question, Gary.
Next question, very simple one, is what does it mean to adopt the too easy mindset?
It means it's too easy.
It is quite simple though, in fairness, like as in, like it's the reason I actually love saying too easy all the time is because it actually encompasses a lot of more complex things that you could flesh out. Like, you could say that it's really important to have a sense of self-confidence and self-efficacy because that improves your ability to do different tasks day to day and throw yourself into uncomfortable situations, blah, 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 getting out of your comfort zone. That's a really fancy way of saying it. Really simple way of saying it is come at everything with the too easy mindset. That, if I have an exam coming up, that from the get-go, I'm going to be saying, oh yeah, it's going to be too easy. And then what you do is you use that as a means of like, promoting the actions that result in that too easy outcome. Because like, well, personally anyway, and I know you're obviously the same, like you don't just be dumb and just say, oh yeah, it's too easy, and then just not prepare for something. Like it's supposed to be a starting point. You say, oh yeah, that's going to be too easy. And then you take care of it being too easy by doing the necessary actions. And then you essentially have that confidence. You have that sense of self-efficacy, you do what's required, and then you have a positive outcome. So that applies to exams. It applies to things in your career. Like if you have an interview, like if you've got an interview coming up, you don't start off with the mindset that, oh, I hate interviews, it's going to be terrifying. You say, no, it's going to be too easy. And then again, you come at it with that sense of, you're calm, you've got that sense of self-efficacy, you're going to do the things that are required for you to prepare for the interview. And yeah, it's basically like, why would you not want to approach every area of your life with that mindset? As long as you can, follow through with the actions that are required.
As I said, I just want to make everyone an absolute savage, and absolute savages think everything is too easy. So
exactly, like I think there's nothing more toxic than adopting a victim mentality. Like I think that is actually toxic to.
It's actually called the too hard mentality.
The too hard mentality. Like that is literally toxic to every area of your life. And like that's actually an evidence-based like claim, as in like whether it be related to pain, whether it be related to exercise or actual career achievements. Like you do not want to be the person that turns around and says, oh, this happened to me because of Paddy, or because of like where I grew up, or because of like whatever, like my gender. It's because I'm a man that I can't do this thing. It's like that's just not a helpful way of approaching your life. I don't see why anyone would find being a victim or saying that things are too hard attractive. Like that is never attractive, because even if you say something is too easy and you give it your best shot, if you don't follow through, like you don't squat 200 kilos but you squat 195, you still squat at 195. That's in like you've made progress. Like if you say it's going to be too easy to get an A1 and you put together all the behaviors that are required, like who cares if you get an A2? Like you still got an A2. That's different than being like the victim that says, oh, I'm not going to get good grades because my parents didn't bring me up like that. Like that's just not how you want to live your life. Well, thank you.
Not at all. All right, next question.
How can I help my parents or grandparents take up resistance training? With a caveat that they want to, but have concerns about safety. Paddy, what do you think?
Just show them how. Tell them that it's safe, and make sure they're doing it in a safe manner. I actually don't think this is a hard question. It's like literally,
no.
if they're going to go to the gym with you, like literally be like, okay, cool. Maybe you start them out on machines. It's all resistance at the end of the day. They're like literally very safe environment, very easy to control every little variable, and then just keep progressing them. Keep an eye on them and go, yeah, cool. Right, you have done this. You're able to leg press fucking, I don't know, your body weight or whatever. And then you go, okay, let's see if we can get you into a slightly more quote unquote unsafe environment and get you doing some, free weight squats, and literally just progress it like you would anyone. Just make it more challenging, progressively overload over time. And it's literally as simple as that. So I don't even know how you'd answer this question. It literally is just show them how to do it safely, show them somehow or some way in which they can progress, and you're done.
Yeah, and I agree, but I do think that in this case as well, knowledge is power. Because I think it's easy for like me and you to tell people that they can just go away and do it and it's fine. But I think knowledge is power in a sense that your parents, your grandparents, they might view you as just being their little kid, as in like, all right, what does this chap know about exercise prescription, So I think there's you can use appeal to authority to your advantage there by saying, like, for example, the American College of Sports Medicine, all right, use that name and say, oh, these are guidelines put together by loads of doctors and experts. And what they suggest is that that elderly people and all adults perform strengthening exercises 2 to 3 times per week because it improves your health, because it improves your all-cause mortality, i.e. not dying. But yeah, so you use all those facts to your advantage. You say, oh, this is what the researchers are saying, and then they might be like, oh, but I don't know, like, I'm 80 now. And then you say, oh, actually, did you know there was a trial in 2015 called the Lift More trial in elderly ladies with osteoporosis, and they were able to do high intensity resistance training with no adverse outcomes, improve their bone mineral density, etc. Like, if you can have those facts at the ready, I think that helps. Okay, it doesn't mean that facts change behavior, but it does mean that you're providing the necessary reassurance to show them that actually, do you know what? I've made sure that this is safe for you. Like, I assure you this is safe. And then what you do is you build self-efficacy. You start with something that's really achievable. I was just helping my grand out with this earlier in the week. And basically what we did, we started off with sit to stands. So literally, arms across the chest, Granda, can you stand up out of the chair? He's like, yeah, of course I can stand up out of the chair. Like, obviously. All right, Granda, let's do that 15 times. And then you do 15 times and suddenly that's a set of squats. Like, that's hard for an elderly person. Okay, so that's where you start. And then you say, all right, Granda, actually, why don't you try and hold this little dumbbell I got you? And then you're progressing. Then you're applying progressive overload. So you basically have to show people that they're able to do it, have some degree of knowledge to show that you've actually thought about this and you're concerned about them. And then you address their concerns with understanding and compassion, because it is totally understandable that someone who has never lifted weights is going to be concerned about the safety of it. So what you do then is you say that, oh, actually, I know your back is at you, but we know that when people tend to do exercise like this, they tend to their back pain can actually improve, and it actually strengthens the back and it strengthens the legs, and that can be helpful for Granda, when you were picking up the dog. All right, so you make it relatable, you make it meaningful to them, and you back it up with the knowledge, and you promote self-efficacy, and it'll be a smoother process then. I think that's that.
Next question
is there a difference in low carbohydrate versus low fat diet for fat loss? With the caveat that I am a GAA player. What do you think, Paddy?
Okay, well, first of all, if we just forget about the last section, in terms of purely fat loss, okay, pure fat loss, at the end of the day, there's no real difference. Like, yes, there is, in so far as you might personally prefer a certain higher carb or higher fat or whatever, and thus it makes you stick to the diet. Your adherence goes up. Outside of that, in terms of like what most people are asking this question, like, is there some sort of biological, biochemical, physiological reason that a high fat diet or a high carb diet or a low carb or a low fat diet or whatever is going to give you this metabolic edge? Like, I just don't think the research would support that either way,
No.
Outside of which may become important for the GAA side of things, outside of carbohydrates, generally seem to offer a better return on investment in terms of exercise, so your ability to exercise. So you might find a higher carb diet, which again, you might think goes against whatever you've been told. You might find that a higher carb diet is actually better for fat loss from the perspective that you then are able to train harder. You are then able to maybe push a little bit harder on your cardio sessions, your lifting sessions. You're able to keep your numbers up a little bit higher. And thus, if you had a twin or twins or whatever, and one of them did low fat and one of them did low carb, like you may actually see the low fat and thus higher carb individual get better results, assuming adherence is the same, purely because they were able to push a little bit harder in the gym, able to push their cardio a little bit harder. However, even then, I would think it would be relatively meaningless in the grand scheme of things from a purely fat loss perspective, because at the end of the day, is it going to make or break your physique if you went from benching 100 kilos for 8, say, and you on the high carb diet were able to maintain that, whereas your twin brother on the higher fat diet lost a little bit of strength and went down to 95 kilos for 8? Like, I don't think that is going to be a noticeable difference in your physique. You might find that the higher carb got a little bit leaner because, again, like they're able to push themselves a little bit harder during the cardio that they're doing. But again, that's depending on what type of cardio you're doing, how you react as an individual, et cetera, et cetera. So at the end of the day, I think it's relatively meaningless. However, if we're talking from the perspective of performance on the whole, so you're a GA player, I would 100% be in preference of a higher carb diet. It's going to give you the most return on investment for what you're presumably trying to do, which is lose a little bit of fat while continuing to at least perform at the same level, if not improve. So I think carbohydrates are probably going to give you the best return on investment with that. However, that doesn't necessarily mean you have to be excessively low on your fat intake. Like, I always think these questions are a bit like kind of miss the forest for the trees, because it's like, it's one or the other. You're either low fat or you're high fat. And it's like, okay, well, why can't I just be moderate fat and moderate carbs? Like, have as much fat as I need. We'll say somewhere in that range of 0.6 to 1 grams per kg. So again, if you're a 100 kilo individual, that's somewhere in the range of 60 to 100 grams of fat, and then fill the rest with carbs, depending on what your overall calories are like. And again, I would probably bias, like if you start noticing like your calories need to go way down and you're still taking in the 1 gram per kilo of fat, and I don't know, we'll just say as an arbitrary number, your carbs, if you wanted to lower your calories any further, your carbs needed to go below, say, 200, maybe I would start pulling calories from the fat side of things, So in my opinion, I would 100% be biasing carbs because they offered a better return on investment for performance. But that doesn't necessarily mean you need to just bottom out fat intake from the off,
Yep, I totally agree, and there's not really much else to add. The practical take-home point is that the carbohydrates for sports in general are your friend, and you, outside of very specific cases, I see very little reason for someone to assume that a low carbohydrate diet is going to be better for any sport, and that includes even the ones that you would consider to be quote unquote like lower intensity, like race walking, for example. Like you see when race walkers are put on a low carbohydrate, high fat diet, it actually impairs their exercise economy. So they're actually not as efficient anymore at doing the training that they need to be able to do. And there's multiple different reasons for that, all of which have been written about on our website. So you can check out there for more information. But anyway, next question is top 3 supplements, ? Short and sweet. What are your top 3 supplements, Patrick?
First of all, I hate these questions because it's an it depends question, you know, like top 3 supplements for fat loss, top 3 supplements for health, top 3 supplements for muscle building. Like, what are we talking about? You know, so obviously, like this is the thing about people asking questions as well. Like, they always just presume that everyone has the same goals as them, and that those goals are obvious. Like, obviously, you should know my goals without me having to tell you, which obviously they're not. But yeah, in terms of supplements, like, my go-to is always your diet needs to be maximized first. So, like, you're not going to get some edge if your diet is not where it needs to be. Same with the training. You know, you're not going to get some edge if you just take some fucking super pump 3000. It's not just going to build muscle if your training is fucking dog shit, like, you know. So they're the caveats. I'm going to presume, again, the lifestyle factors are in place. Your sleep is good, you're managing stress, etc. You know. Then you start thinking about supplements, and I'm going to give a very generalist view on this, and then we can talk a little bit about some specifics. So creatine, I think most people could benefit from some creatine. Doesn't mean it's an essential or that it's number 1 on my list. No. But if someone was to ask me, like, should I take creatine? I'd be hard pressed to find a reason to say no. Right. Next thing then, a multivitamin. Like, that doesn't mean that everyone has to be on a multivitamin. That also doesn't mean that a multivitamin allows you to have a shit diet. It also doesn't mean that a multivitamin is going to cure what ails you. You know, I think of a multivitamin as kind of insurance. It's like, yeah, it allows you to get things that you maybe are potentially a little bit low on, right? Even then, like, I would rather see you take a smaller or a lower dose of a higher quality multivitamin than take a shit quality multivitamin, because oftentimes you'll see, like, there's different, we'll call them impurities in some of those lower quality multivitamins, and oftentimes you'll see that the vitamins and minerals in them are in the wrong form. Well, not the minerals so much, but the vitamins are in the wrong form for the body to even absorb. So it's like, yeah, you put it in there, but it's useless. You're just going to piss it out, you know? So I would spend a little bit more on the multivitamin, even if that meant you had to take it, you know, once per week, you know? And even then, again, it's like this, it largely becomes irrelevant if you actually have your diet 100% in order. But, you know, it's the modern world. Like, who has their diet 100% in order? It's rare, you know? After that, then I just think like a whey protein or something, or like a protein powder. It's handy, and a lot of people find it a struggle to get enough protein into their diet. So again, you could just take something like milk, but maybe you're lactose intolerant, you know. So a protein powder is fairly handy, fairly convenient, allows you to hit your protein targets. So outside of that, I'm like, you could go down the rabbit hole and take anything, right? But for most people, I think that kind of covers all your bases. That gets you performance, health, and we'll call it body composition. You know, they're the 3 aspects that people are most likely looking for in terms of their supplements. After that, then you can start thinking about supplements for particular issues. And what I mean by that is, you know, like I said, you should have your diet, your stress in order, your sleep in order, all those other things. But perhaps you're not able to get them in order. There is something that is a little bit outside of your control, like you're struggling to manage your stress. You know, maybe taking some sort of adaptogen allows you to do that, like get ahead of the curve, so to speak. You know, take the adaptogen, you know, get ahead of the curve, get better stress management practices in place. Same with sleep. Like maybe you take a stack to help you with sleep, improve your ability to stay asleep, improve your ability to get to sleep, or whatever. And as a result, then you're able to get better practices in place, set up better sleep habits, whatever the fuck. Same with like pre-workouts, whether they're neurological, whether they're like stimulatory, whether they're for a pump or whatever. It's like, if I'm going to be taking that, I want to make sure my training is 100% locked down first. And there's a valid reason for me to be taking this. Like, I see people taking like pump products, to help with the pump. And it's like, you're literally doing like low reps. You're not going to be getting a pump anyway. Like, you might get some of a pump, but like, it's largely irrelevant. So again, you have to know what you're taking and why you're taking it. And you should have your training, lifestyle, whatever, set up to take advantage of that supplement if it is for performance, So basically, you can take targeted supplements to help you get ahead of the curve. But in my mind, I'm like, you shouldn't be taking, like, you shouldn't need to be taking sleep supplements every night. Like, in my mind, I'm like, why do you have to do that to get, or to do something that we have been doing for millennia, And same with stress management subs. It's like, I would rather see you actually get good practices in place for stress management than having to take some sort of supplement for the rest of your life. Same with inflammation supplements. It's like why do we have inflammation? Like, what's going wrong here that we need to manage this so much, especially chronically, So yeah, that's my kind of perspective on it. I like supplements. I like strategic use of supplements. That doesn't mean that, like, the majority of my clients, like I would say literally 9 out of 10 of my clients, don't take any supplements, like maybe a multivitamin, maybe protein powder, and again, maybe creatine. Outside of that, I'm like, very rare instances where I'd be like, for the next 4 to 6 weeks, I want you to take this supplement because we're trying to do X, Y, and Z. But even then, it's like, it depends.
Yeah, like the way I look at it, like, people come to us with their own goals, and very often those goals are very achievable with basic changes in training and nutrition and lifestyle. So like, for me, like, if someone came to me with a fat loss goal, I would have no reason to believe that we need to include any supplements to move towards that goal. Like, as you said, they can be there as an insurance policy, and that's fine. But overall, like, I think if you think that your progress is being hindered by not taking supplements, like, there's definitely like bigger issues at stake. So there you go. 2 more questions and then we're done. But this one, how to set up a power building program. For some context here, like, power building is generally like used to define a program that incorporates both powerlifting and bodybuilding focal points. So basically, someone who wants to build strength and hypertrophy, with the caveat that that strength is specific to powerlifting related tasks. So namely, like the one rep max on a squat and bench and deadlift. That is my assumption, because like, otherwise I would just consider it to be a general kind of program, because you're going to build strength in a hypertrophy program anyway, or a program where you're training in any rep range, because you get stronger. But in this case, the strength is specific to those lifts and that level of intensity. This is actually something I wrote about last year. It's on our website. It's freely available, free article, basically how you can basically turn any program into a quote unquote power building program, because basically all you need to do is take the strength that you're building and make it specific to those lifts. So what you could do literally is take your current program where you're working mainly in the 6 to 15 repetition range, let's say, which I would consider to be a fairly generalist repetition range, good for hypertrophy, good for strength. And then what you do is you just do a single, like a 1 repetition single at let's say RPE 8, so like 2 reps in the tank, around that range, before you do your working sets on your squats, your bench press, and your deadlift. Essentially what you're doing there is you're translating any strength that you're building into specifically 1 rep strength, and that could be progressing, or it could be just maintaining while you're focusing more on hypertrophy. So that's the simplest way of going about this. But the other thing I would say is that hypertrophy, so like the actual muscle building component of this, is not specific to any particular rep range, and there seems to be benefits to using a variety of rep ranges anyway. Like there's recent evidence in the last month that shows that there's that different hypertrophy signaling pathways activated by different intensities. So like, you know, that goes back to our earlier discussion where there is definitely a benefit of doing what has been tried and tested throughout the ages. Like most bodybuilders will tell you that you should probably do different repetition ranges, and you know that is confirmed at the basic level of signaling. But basically what that means for your hypertrophy programming is that you can include high intensity sets of like 1 to 5 and still, you know, be successful in your muscle building once you're doing it and a number of sets that is adequate for you to gain muscle. So that'd be the first point. Have you anything else to add to that, Paddy?
No, not really. Like, to be honest, it's actually like all you're suggesting is they learn the skill of powerlifting, like do a few singles that are sub-maximal so that they can literally learn to do singles, which is powerlifting. Outside of that, there's a number of ways you could actually set up the overall structure of the program. If you're like, oh, I'm like, that's not what I mean, because that's what you'll see people go and go. They're like, no, I don't mean like just powerlifting. Like I want to get better at the squat, bench, deadlift, but realistically, I just want to be jacked. And it's like, okay, well, like, so all you're saying is you want to get generally stronger. Like that's it.
Yeah.
Right. And I just don't see how like a well-designed strength program should be getting you stronger in the 6 to 15 rep range, like you said, which then translates to a stronger 1RM. Like I'm like, sometimes I think of this, I'm like, do people legitimately think like if my 6 rep max goes up, do they think their 1 rep max is going to be below that? No, of course not. So if their 6 rep max goes up, there's 1 rep max is going to be higher than that, you know? So they're going to be stronger than their 6 rep max. So if you go from doing 60 kilos for 6 on your bench press to doing 80 kilos for 6 on your bench press, your 1 rep max has most certainly improved, you know? So you just need to get stronger, full stop, and you will get stronger in the repetition range that powerlifting would use. However, you still do need to utilize, or rather learn, the skill of expressing that strength for a 1 rep max, because it's different. It's 100% different than doing repeated reps. Like doing a max effort single is completely different than doing reps, you know? So you need to obviously build that skill. And again, like Gary said, you can do that a number of ways. One way to do it is literally just doing a single, a sub-maximal single even, before training. You could also be like, no, that's not what I mean. I want something different than that. And then there's 2 ways that I would see that, or rather I see most people want, and that is you can do 2 days of strength work. So you do a lower day, which is just your strength rep range. It's all like below 5s, maybe 6 is the maximum, right? And you only do compound lifts. So on your lower body strength day, you do squats, deadlifts, leg press, RDL, something like that, right? And they're all like heavy, right? And that's it, right? The next day you do your upper body day, and again, it's just a heavy day. You do your bench press, you do your bent over row, you do your overhead press, you do your chin up, and maybe you do some fucking close grip bench or skull crushers and some fucking easy bar bicep curls, right? Heavy again, right? That's your strength. You're just focusing on strength. And then you can do 3 days, 2 other days or 3 days of like hypertrophy focused work. You know, you could do a lower body session, and it's just all in the kind of, we'll say 6 to 12 rep range. It's more higher rep stuff. Like you start off the block, you're doing like 12 reps in everything, even in a squat. Maybe you actually just go, fuck it, I'm not even going to do the squat. I'm going to just start off on the leg press or the hack squat or something. And I'm going to do loads of leg extensions, and I'm going to do all isolation work. And you're just getting a load of volume from, again, isolation work, and you're doing your fucking 15 sets of calves on that day too. And then you do like an upper body day, and you do chest and back, you know, and it's literally just like, again, all hypertrophy specific stuff. Maybe you're doing the bench press, but maybe you're actually just going onto the fucking chest press machine and just getting a sickening pump. It's all higher rep stuff. And then on the 5th day, maybe you do like shoulders and arms, and it's all, again, just sickening pump, right? That's one way you can do it, because that's when people say they want a power building program, that's actually what they want, you know. Or you can do it over 4 days, and what you can do is the first exercise on each of those days is a strength exercise, you know. So you're doing your 5 sets of 5 or fucking 3 sets of 3, right, on those exercises. And again, you could easily just do like squat the first day, bench press the second day, deadlift the third day, and fucking overhead press or incline press the fourth day, right? You can do it like that, and again, then afterwards you just move to higher reps. So maybe the first one you literally do fucking 3 to 5 sets of 5 reps, right? Next exercise, you're like, okay, I'm gonna do, again, we'll say it's your bench press. You do your bench press. The next exercise, even, you do fucking dips, and you're doing like, yeah, we're going higher rep with this. We're kind of the 8 to 10 rep range. Fucking, that's it. And then the next exercise after that, maybe you do some fucking, I don't know, cable flies or something, you know? And you're like, yeah, I'm just fucking hammering that, and it's a 15 rep range. So you're literally hitting everything. And then maybe you do superset each of those exercises with a back exercise as well in the same rep range. So you might do bench press and fucking chest supported row, and you might do fucking, I don't know, chest press and fucking one arm dumbbell row or something. I don't know, fucking whatever. And then you do your flies with I don't know, rear delt flies or something. I don't fucking know. You know, you just set it up whatever. So you basically just go, cool, I've hit all the major muscles, and I've gone from strength work. I've gone from the very low rep range all the way up to the high rep range. So I've hit every fucking possible motor unit. I've fatigued every single possible muscle fiber. I've hit it from every angle, and you're good to go. Like, that's another way that you could set it up, because those two are generally what people actually want when they talk about power building.
And basically, you can do whatever you want. You know, I think one of the constraints on people in this case is that they feel that their program needs to have a name, like as in like, oh, I do the upper lower split, or I do the push pull leg split. Like, that's what I do. But when you actually free yourself, like which I appreciate is actually kind of hard if you don't have like basic programming knowledge. But like what you can do is like just free yourself and just be like, oh yeah, my program is just a program. Like, I don't have specific days that I call anything. I don't have specific days for specific repetition ranges. Like, you can have sets of 1 and sets of 20 on the same day and have great outcomes. So like, I think once you actually begin to learn some of the basics of programming, that stuff becomes, you know, quite freeing in a sense. But there you go. That was good advice, I think. And finally, should I pull sumo or conventional? What do you think, Ben?
Well, sumo is cheating, so pull conventional.
Conventional is cheating, you mean? Conventional is cheating because basically conventional, you don't even use like all that hip range of motion, all that abduction, that external rotation. So conventional is just cheating.
So what you're saying is conventional is actually not full range of motion.
Oh no. God no. Sumo, you need sumo for that full round, bro.
All right, you heard it here first. Sumo for full range of motion.
But yeah, no, in all seriousness, like, should you pull sumo or conventional? Like, do whatever you want. As in, like, it doesn't really make a difference to any meaningful outcomes that you probably care about, other than, like, if you're a powerlifter, choose the one that feels stronger. If you're a general trainee, choose whichever feels most comfortable, with the caveat that you can rotate them over time, and that's absolutely fine. Like I do both. I'm generally stronger when it comes to sumo, but I train both because they're a little bit different, and I see no reason not to be as strong on as many exercise variations as possible. Why not?
Yeah.
The generalist.
So that's it. I think that as well. And again, sumo or conventional, it matters not if you're a powerlifter. The only thing that matters with that is like which one is stronger for you, or rather which one can you progressively overload for longer, right? If you are a generalist, like Gary said, you're just gen pop, you're like, literally pick whatever one will consistently have you deadlifting, you know? Like if you find you get hip pain doing sumo, like I just don't see the return on investment spending 20 minutes a day trying to get the last millimeter of range of motion in your hip that'll allow you to do it. Like maybe that's good for powerlifting, but for most people, I'm like, I just don't see the return on investment for that when you could just be conventionally deadlifting, you know? If you are an athlete of, say, a field sport athlete, like I would probably say stick to conventional, purely because, I don't know, it appears you get a little bit better hip extension. Maybe that would be better for jumping, you know, broad jumping and vertically jumping. But that's just kind of my thought process on it. Like I don't think it's going to be so meaningful that you're like, oh, well, you pulled sumo and that's the reason you don't have fucking this high of a vertical jump. Like I don't see it as being that meaningful. I just see it being slightly more specific to the task that you're going to be engaging in. However, having said that, like realistically, resistance training is not specific. Like it is at its very core GPP, general physical preparedness, and anyone who tells you that it is SPP, like specific or sporting physical preparedness, is trying to sell you a crock of shit.
Yep, it's all just GPP. That's it.
Like obviously there is sporting specificity. Like, you know, if you're like, oh, well, there's these injuries in my sport and I'm going to do these exercises because these injuries are prevalent. Like obviously that is sporting specific, but saying like, I have to be in this exact stance because that's the stance I'm going to be in for my sport. I'm like, all right, well, that's irrelevant. Like this is GPP. I just want to get your muscles stronger and potentially bigger. That's it. Like,
yep. Like the specificity pendulum can swing way too far when it comes to like sport. Like people try and predict all the specific positions and, you know, create exercises that are exactly like that. And I think like by viewing it as GPP, as general physical preparedness, it's actually a much better way of looking at strength and conditioning training in general, because you just want to have comprehensive physical capacity. Like that's what you're trying to build. And ultimately, like sport is quite chaotic and you can't predict every position that you're going to be in. So like just be comprehensive in your preparation, and that should essentially be your goal.
And also I just don't see, if you want to do another specific session, then go out and play your sport specifically for that hour rather than spending it in the gym. Like that's the highest degree of specificity you can get.
Yep. And for more on that sort of discussion, the podcast with Dave Nolan kind of goes through some of that stuff related to GA, because I know a lot of listeners are interested in GA. We talk a bit about specificity, about resistance training, etc. So that's it for this podcast. Thank you all for listening. And thanks for the questions. Really helpful. Anytime we do put up a Q&A request on Instagram, we'd really appreciate if you send in the questions, or you can submit them in the question form in the description box, because obviously it's far better if you guys get to lead the podcast rather than us trying to think of things that we think are interesting. So there you go.
Just talk absolute fucking waffle. That's what we do.
Waffle is right.
Anyway, I have nothing else to add. So
it's too easy.
Peace out.